Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Kreitis. Today is May 16th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. So what took place in the markets today? Well, the S&P closed up 25 points. The Dow was up 215. The NASDAQ closed up 76 points, representing a 1 percentage point gain for the day. And the Russell 2000, the small cap index, rose 9 points. Now, this was sort of reminiscent to yesterday in the fact that the markets started to sell off towards the end of the day. Now, of course, they all ended higher for the day, and they were all of these indices were higher for the day. But nevertheless, we did see a sell-off during the last half hour to hour of trading. So this is, again, something to be mindful of, because for the past several months, it was the reverse. We said be mindful of the last hour to half hour of trading because the market, regardless of what's going on, it seems to rally during the last hour of trading. Well, now we're starting to see the opposite with a sell-off during the last 30 minutes to 60 minutes of the trading session. And that was true today. So it's something to be mindful of, and we will continue to monitor that as we move forward. Now, the main reasons, the main drivers for this market rally today had to deal with an earnings report from Walmart and from Cisco, both beating expectations and providing some decent forward guidance. Well, the markets like that news. Now, it's also interesting to note that some headline news that we discussed on the Political podcast, episode 70A, we talked about how Walmart made mention of the tariffs and how the U.S. shopper is likely going to have to pay them. The increased costs are going to be passed on to the U.S. shopper. Now, that's interesting, because we have the President of the United States out there telling us that's not the case. Mr. President says the way that tariffs work is China reaches into their pocketbook and writes a big fat check to Uncle Sam, and they just send us billions and billions and billions of dollars, oh my. We know that's a bunch of malarkey. We know one of two things. The President is either lying or he is incompetent. He either doesn't understand or he understands and tells us a lie. Either is unacceptable, isn't it, folks? So it's also interesting because this president loves to take credit and ownership of the stock market, and he loves when it goes up, up, and up. Well, it went up, up, and up today on the back of Walmart. But Walmart just came out and said that the tariffs are going to cause prices to increase, and U.S. shoppers are going to pay for them. Did he come out and tweet and demonize Walmart? No, he didn't. He had to pick between two babies. Did he want to slice the baby in half? No, he just said, I'm going to pick the stock market on this one. Good job, Walmart. And he just, sort of kept his mouth shut. So that's an interesting takeaway, isn't it? Because this goes exactly to what we have been saying here for months, that it was a flawed decision on behalf of this president to take ownership of this economy and the stock market, because it boxes him in to these types of situations. And this is now front and center. And we're going to see more and more of this on a daily basis. Oil, I think it was up about 1% to 2% earlier in the trading session. Now WTI is at $63 a barrel, and Brent is at $72.80. This is likely on the back of the mumblings of more foreign intervention, perhaps with the state of Iran. I pray to God we do not get involved in another war or conflict or anything to do with the Iranians. I don't want us meddling in Iran. I don't want us meddling in Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. I don't want us meddling in Venezuela. But there we are. And there we are likely to stay. We got a lot of sabre rattling going on in the Middle East right now. It's an all-out coup being staged down in Venezuela. It isn't even covert. It's overt. It's on the mainstream media. We are acknowledging Guaido as the president. President Maduro isn't leaving. He is recognized as the rightful president of Venezuela by Russia, by China, and by Iran. Very interesting, isn't it? So we're going to have to keep our eyes on this one. We're going to have to keep our eyes to see what happens with the price of oil. Because if the price of oil continues to go up as we enter the summer months, which usually means more driving, people are going on vacation, it's a nicer day out, you take a nice drive, are we going to see an increase in our gasoline prices. Well, that's not going to be too pretty for the consumer, is it? That might put a drag on GDP figures, so it's going to be interesting to see how the president starts to play this one as well. Gold was down a little bit. It is at $1,284 an ounce. Silver took another hit to the downside and now sits at $14.51 an ounce. People, if you believe in the precious metals, as I do, buy low, sell high. These are opportunities to accumulate if and when you can. So take advantage if and when you can with these prices. 10-year U.S. Treasury increased 1 percentage point and is now at 2.39%, right around 2.4%. So there was some selling in the bond market. Was that cash moving the bond market and going into stocks? Is that another reason we saw an increase in the stock market today? Interesting question. Perhaps that was the case. The VIX, the volatility index, dropped another 7 percentage points and currently sits at $15.29. Now, before we get into our topic today it's pretty much going to focus on the military-industrial complex. This is a theme that we have been discussing both here on the economic podcast and also on the political-geopolitical podcast. But it goes to a broader sense of today's title, A Market Divided Cannot Stand. But before we get to all this, let's just take a quick look at what's going on in the Asian session, since, again, we do these podcasts later in the evening, and so we have the Asian markets open. Well, the Nikkei, the Japanese market, is up 1 percentage point. The Chinese markets, however, if we're looking at the broadest measure, the Shanghai Composite, it is down 1.5 percentage points. The Shanghai 50 is down also 1.5 percentage points. We have the South Korean markets open as well. They are down slightly, only 2 points. And then we have the Hong Seng, the Hong Kong market. They are also down 1 percentage point so far in the trading session. So we'll see where that goes. Of course, that could turn around, because if we go to the land down under, the Australian market is up about 0.5 percentage point. So we have some mixed trading going on. So it's going to be interesting to see, because will that translate here in the United States tomorrow, or will we continue our rally on the back of the good report coming out of Walmart and Cisco? So, what do I mean by a market divided cannot stand? Well, I think you know what I'm talking about here, folks, because we've been talking about this for quite a while. This market we are completely disjointed from reality. We are almost beyond being in the financial world of Oz. You can't look at stocks. You cannot look at these corporations' fundamentals. You cannot look at their balance sheet, their income statement, their statement of cash flows. You can do the analysis. I hope you do continue to do the analysis to keep your mind sharp. But your conclusion, unfortunately, as mine, are virtually completely irrelevant, because it doesn't matter what their debt level is. It will eventually, but right now it doesn't. Doesn't matter how much cash they're generating. Doesn't matter what their liabilities are, what their assets are, what their business plan is, what management is saying and discussing. Doesn't matter any type of fancy ratio you want to look out there and say, well, I've used this ratio and it's done very well for me. It makes no difference what you've looked at in the past. None whatsoever. Even technical levels. Making no sense here. This is a market that is driven by central bankers and by the President of the United States and his Twitter account. Can't make it up. This is what he's doing. This is what we have been witnessing really for the past couple of months. And I think the president has been turning up the heat on this because he is in the midst now of a trade war. Of course, he wants to spin it and tell us, it's just a little squabble. I have a beautiful relationship with President Xi of China. He sends me beautiful letters. Again, we're going to get a suite at the Hilton. We're going to live it up. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about a thing. Meanwhile, we're escalating tariffs, increasing tariffs. The Chinese are responding in kind. And there are some other issues going on that we discussed in the geopolitical report, so check that out. When is this going to end? No idea. No idea. Nobody has any clue. Because we are at the mercy of tweets. I seriously thought that the markets would eventually catch on to this narrative from President Trump Larry Kudlow, although we don't know where Larry Kudlow is, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, Kellyanne Conway, and other advisors and members of the Trump administration coming out and telling everybody that everything's fine, the talks are constructive, just don't worry about a thing. We'll be fine at the end. And then you have these Twitter storms that come out, and one day the president says everything's fine. The other day, the Chinese, they better get back to the trading table because we got to get something done here, because if they wait any longer, it's going to be really bad for them in the future. Again, I am totally against the president of the United States taking to Twitter, making these comments, because it is overt market manipulation, because this president has taken ownership of this economy and the stock market. He knows very well when he takes to Twitter or makes comments, or members of his team and administration make comments, that the markets move. This is an abuse of executive power. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't care if you are a huge supporter of Donald Trump. I don't care if you're a huge anti-Trumper. You have to agree with this fact. He has taken ownership. He pays very close attention to it. He talks about it all the time. He tweets about it all the time. So do you honestly believe that when he takes to Twitter and makes these types of statements that the markets aren't going to move? We have months and months of evidence, folks. Guilty is charged on this one. I cannot agree with it. I cannot stand by and allow the president to simply do this. I have to voice my opinion on this. And again, a letter has been written. I am going to be reading this probably for tomorrow's podcast. I'm, again, finishing up the edits on it, and it's going to be sent to him. It will be posted to our website, thecapitalnews.com. Be sure to check it out. But again, I'm also going to read that on tomorrow's podcast if I do have everything wrapped up to my liking, and it will be sent off. Of course, if I should make any edits after the fact, I will inform you guys, and I will adjust accordingly on the Capital News website. So be sure to read that, debate me on the points, and please share it. I don't care who you send it to. Get it out there, because people need to be educated. People need to be concerned about this, because nobody is above the law. We talk all the time on the geopolitical podcast that we live in a two-tiered system, a two-tiered quote-unquote justice system. Well, the president isn't above the law either. And he knows perfectly well that what he is doing is manipulating these markets to fit his political narrative, that he's the best, that he has taken ownership and title of this economy and the stock market, and he wants everything to go up, up, and up. He will take credit for the quote-unquote good days, but anything that is to the downside, it's going to be somebody else's fault. It's going to be political divisiveness. It's going to be endless wars. It's going to be continuous investigations by the Democrats. It's going to be the Federal Reserve. It's going to be China. It will not be Donald J. Trump. You can bet your last dollar on that one. He will not take responsibility for this, which is an extremely poor taste, and it is just poor leadership, in my opinion. And I think that's hard to argue against. But if you disagree, voice your opinion, leave your comments. So we have a market divided, and a market divided cannot stand. And I think we may have done a previous podcast on this as I'm saying this right now, because it's so true. We saw this early on. We not only have the fundamentals of looking at corporations that you may invest in, looking at their books, looking at their financial statements, but you also have economic data that continues to come out that is, some of it's mixed, but a lot of it is negative or is sort of starting to flash some yellow signals. We're not quite blinking red all over the place, but we're definitely not putting the pedal to the metal by any stretch of the imagination, regardless of what the president and his administration says, because we know the 3.2% GDP number was a bunch of malarkey. We are likely to see a sizable downward revision, and we're very likely to see a lot slower growth in the second quarter of 2019. Now, of course, this remains to be seen, but once you lift the hood and actually look below and beneath the headlines, you see there are some problems. That's what we talk about here all the time. The market continues to shrug it off. Doesn't care about the data. Doesn't care about the news. It actually, for a second yesterday, and we talked about this, on the back of some negative economic news, it started to sell off. But the president didn't like it. So he came out Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin came out. Oh, no, we're going to put a hold on those auto tariffs for the European Union. Don't worry about a thing. 6 months, we'll get to it in 6 months. Like that doesn't cause problems. Like people don't know, oh, well, now great. The can's been kicked down the road. Now I got to wait another 6 months before I can make a decision as to what's going to happen. I mean, this is total, overt market manipulation because the president has taken ownership and he doesn't want to get blamed for it. As simple as that. Now, getting on with a broader conversation of sort of the military-industrial complex in this country, the war machine. We talked about that in greater depth on episode 70A today, the Geopolitical podcast. And I'm going to continue here because we talk about this to some degree in our book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing. And I just want to read to you a few passages from this. And one of them is a quote from President Dwight Eisenhower during his farewell address to the nation, informing the American people in a very honorable way, in my opinion, of the threat and the power and the corruption that exists and will persist regarding the military-industrial complex. So here's a brief quote from President Eisenhower. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. I mean, kudos to President Eisenhower for not just simply saying it was an honor and a privilege being your president. It was an honor and a privilege serving in the American Armed Forces. He went a little bit further than that and said, you guys got to keep your eyes and ears open here and pay attention because there are some organizations behind the curtain who are pulling the strings here, and something's going on, and you have to pay attention. Now, how many people are paying attention? Unfortunately, not too many, because if you're looking at the military-industrial complex, they are alive and well. So much for draining the swamp, right? We talk about this all the time. There is no draining of the swamp. The kiddie pool has yet to be drained. Banks making record profits. The military-industrial complex making record profits. $1 trillion budget deficits, therefore adding trillions of dollars to our national debt. Government largesse has not been reduced. The banks, their power has not been reduced. The power of the military-industrial complex has not been reduced. In fact, it's getting bigger. We're starting to meddle. We have been meddling in Venezuela. We're sabre rattling in Iran. We're still in Afghanistan. We're still in Iraq. We're still in Syria. Libya is in a mess. So, I mean, what's going on here, folks? You really think the swamp is being drained? I don't. But in the book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing, we tell you about the players, we tell you about the game, we tell you how to prepare yourself and to formulate your portfolio if you want to take advantage of the game, of the players, of the system. And so we talk about that to some degree in our book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing. Now, it's interesting because we also put in the book a statement from the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, that, quote, the greatest single threat to our national security is our debt. Let me repeat this. Again, coming from the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, that the greatest single threat to our national security is our debt. This book was published in 2015. My goodness, if Admiral Mike Mullen thought our national debt was a problem 4 years ago, my goodness, well, we've only added an additional $4 trillion to it. It must be a friggin' quagmire now. I mean, get the children under the desks, look out for nuclear fallout. This is ridiculous. Nobody's having these conversations. Nobody's talking about slowing any of this stuff down. I don't think they have any solution. Because if they did, you would start to hear it. Where's the president on this? Where's Larry Kudlow on this? We'll just grow ourselves out of it. No, we won't. Do the math, people. We have a demographic cliff coming. We have people getting older. I just read an article yesterday, I think it was. What's our United States birth rate is the lowest it's been in 30-some years. Well, that's not good. We don't have people being replaced to pay for all of these benefits for people who are living longer. You don't need to be a mathematician or an economist to figure that one out. Not a good equation. Where's the leadership? There is none. Now, I want to read another passage out of this book. This was more towards my personal opinion, which is littered throughout this book. So in this book, just so you understand, we have objective analysis, and then there's some subjective where we throw our opinion in there, basically just to give it a personal touch so you understand where the authors are coming from. So allow me to read a few passages, because this might sound a little bit more of a political tinge, but this has so large of implications when it comes to investing as well, because all you have to do, folks, is look at the stock price of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, United Technologies. I mean, they've just shot up to the moon. Don't believe me? Take a look. And again, this book was published in 2015. So from where they were then to where they are today, it's just been unbelievable. Unbelievable. And there's really no end in sight unless there's some sort of problem, which of course we're seeing in Boeing, but that's another story. So allow me to read some of this. Given our adherence to the freedom philosophy, we find current U.S. foreign policy severely flawed and dangerous to the security of the American citizen. The U.S. preaches the virtues of democracy and thus the beauty of man's ability to determine his future. Yet which is the proper method to spread democracy? Through leading by example, trading with those who seek to trade with the United States, or is it through the barrel of a gun? Clearly, if you're in the Middle East and or do not play ball with U.S. interest, it is the latter method. We hear much talk about terrorists and their acts of terror and what they wish to accomplish. Yet is it not terrorizing to the Middle Eastern family walking through their town square to see their neighbors and fellow countrymen killed before their very eyes by a drone attack? What then defines terror? Would you not be scared or terrorized? Then the people of the United States are supposed to be surprised when people around the world bear witness to such poor policy and demand revenge for such atrocities on the lives of innocent victims. Surely, any one of you reading this would demand justice from those who blindly killed your family, friends, neighbors, and countrymen, and did so in the name of a flawed policy while carrying the attitude of being, quote, holier than thou. I mean, these are some serious questions to ponder, folks. How much money does the government want to take from your paycheck every single week to give to these types of corporations that are profiting from war, that are ripping us off? I mean, just look at some of the Inspector General's report, look at some of the Government Accountability Office reports when it comes to where's the money when it comes to the Department of Defense. I mean, whether it's accounting, clerical errors, or not, I mean, these are some pretty fat fingers if it's all clerical errors, because you're really talking about trillions of dollars missing, unaccounted for. Where'd it go? This is your money. Do you wake up in the morning to go take care of a flawed and fraudulent federal government? I don't think you do. I think you wake up in the morning to work hard to take care of yourself and your family and to provide a better future for your children than that which you have. I mean, this is just common sense. But we continue to get hit in the face with the frying pan, and we just continue to march forward and continue to get hit in the face with the frying pan and say, well, that's just the way it is. We're just going to have to continue to deal with it. I don't think we have to continue dealing with it. We need to be educated. Once we are educated, that starts to solve the problem. But just wait. Who's in charge of the government? Who's in charge of the educational system here? Oh, that's right, the government. So fat chance that's going to happen anytime soon. But check out the Cynic's Guide to Investing. Start to connect the dots, understand the players, understand the system, understand the game, and you can prepare yourself accordingly. We will most definitely continue this conversation because it is one worth having. From a political standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from an investing standpoint, and quite literally when it has to deal with war and this type of bloodshed, it has to deal with moral issues and spiritual issues as well. So please be with me. Please pray with me when it comes to no more wars, especially in the Middle East and especially with Iran. We don't need it. We don't need this type of bloodshed. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having you. As always, please like, share, subscribe, get the word out, leave your comments. We do love hearing from you. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.